Welcome back. Continuing to examine the Colle system here, and I wanted to kick off the start of our exploration of some of our heroes in the Colle. And who better to start it off with than George Koltanowski? George Koltanowski was an absolute legend and a person who helped further the Colle system, put it on the map, so to speak. He was a Belgian player. He was born several years after Edgar Colle, or Colle. And he was a four-time, I believe, Belgian champion. Then he moved to the U.S. In the late 1930s. So he played on the Olympiad team for both the U.S. and a couple times for Belgium. And this game that I wanted to cover as our first Heroes of the Colle game is a prize a game where he won the Brilliancy prize in the Belgian Championships in 1936. So let's get right into it. Now it starts out just like in our repertoire, where we zoom along and we get in this position right here, which is kind of like the main tabia in our system. Just like us, he takes on c5 and plays e4. So far we are right where the position we will get most commonly in our Colle system. And here black plays queen to c7. Now we won't see that very much in our games at club level, but this in fact is the most common move by masters. But in the Lichess database, it is only seen 7% of the time at club level, so you won't see it a lot. But what they are doing is they are clamping down on e5. So we've looked at a lot of material where if we can get that pawn to e5, dislodge this knight, which protects the king side, we can get some phenomenal attacking games. So being a master level player, black does not want white to just get in e5 for free. So they play queen to c7. Now Koltanowski, he adds more firepower onto that square, and really emphasizing how much black does not want white to just get in e5. He retreats the bishop. It covers that square. Also lines these pieces up on h2, which may or may not be an issue at some point. So George Koltanowski, he just says, all right, I'll add even more firepower onto this square. And now this is a really interesting moment. Black's starting to realize that white is really getting lined up on e5, and black actually plays knight to g4 here. Now, of course, black, I'm sure, realizes that white isn't just going to fall for this, overwhelming force on h2. I'm sure he anticipated that white was going to play h3 here. But his whole idea was to come back to e5 and just physically blockade that square with his piece, centralize his knight, stop that e5 push by putting a piece there and just physically stopping it. And so now it starts to get pretty instructive. Koltanowski, he takes that piece. Black takes back. And now this is really interesting. You can see that black is hitting Koltanowski's bishop, right? But Koltanowski doesn't care. He just does e takes d, and he realizes that this isolated queen pawn is going to be a weakness, and he doesn't care if he loses the bishop pair, because then he will have a target to fight for the rest of the game. So we get into this isolated queen pawn position. And here is another instructive moment by Koltanowski, just showing how well he understands these positions. Instead of moving his bishop away and trying to preserve the bishop pair, he realizes, I'm going to play knight to f3 here. If he takes that, so be it. And maybe we'll go into a real kind of brief discussion on the isolated queen pawn. But so this isolated queen pawn, of course, the side with it will play for dynamic chances, and they'll either try to go for an attack on the king or to try to push that pawn forward. Now, this is a little oversimplified, but to push this pawn forward, possibly even sacrificing it to blast open the position. But that only works when they have a lead in development. That's when that is usually the most powerful. And so in this case, George Koltanowski, he realizes that, hey, if I play knight to f3 here, I further my development. I get caught up in development. I open up these bishops. I'll have these bishops pointing to the king side. So if anybody gets a king side attack going here, it's likely going to be me. And this is a bit of an oversimplification, but in general, if the side with the IQP, they want to have as many minor pieces on the board as possible. And so usually they want to have at least 3 minor pieces on the board to compensate, to try to get dynamic compensation for having this pawn weakness. So if black were to exchange off this minor pair of pieces, or this pair of minor pieces here, there's not enough material left really for them to have enough compensation for that pawn. So that is why Koltanowski here plays knight to f3. Now, white or black ends up taking that, and we get in this position here where we can see that now Koltanowski is already targeting that isolated queen pawn. So, one interesting thing here actually is, okay, what if they would have taken, if we back up here, if instead of the knight they take this piece here? It's really interesting in that, okay, so if black were to try to use kind of like tactics here by playing rook to d8, what's interesting is actually white can do queen takes d5 here. And normally you would think, okay, well, that's going to fail to this tactic with this discovery, right? Where they check you and line up. But in this particular instance, it's not the case, because white can actually just grab that, and this queen is invulnerable because of this back rank issue where, white is still, struggling to get developed here. So, or sorry, black is struggling to get developed. So that's a really interesting thing just to point out. It's kind of some interesting tactics there. But in the actual game, we ended up getting this position here. Black tries to add protection onto that isolated queen pawn. And what white ends up doing here is putting additional protection onto the square in front of that isolated pawn to restrain that isolated pawn, not let it push through to try to bust the position open, even though we are actually we are not behind in development here. So it's really hard to justify this isolated queen pawn for black, and you can see the evaluation bar agrees. So in the game, black is trying to get pieces behind that isolated pawn. Now, interestingly, Koltanowski, of course, knows how to play against the isolated pawn, and he wants to open up, he wants to prepare for a frontal assault on that pawn, right? He can get his rook on that file, try to contest it. So running out of realizing that, he needs to do something, black ends up playing his b pawn, and he's going to try to do like a minority attack and weaken our pawn structure, or white's pawn structure. But Koltanowski, he just calmly plays bishop to d4, and now look at these beautiful bishops lining up over towards the king. We got the queen in attacking position, so he's not worried about this pawn charging forward. Now black plays bishop to c5. Doesn't really do a whole lot, because we can, as white, we can protect that. We would love these bishops to come off. Every minor piece that comes off in this isolated queen pawn position favors favors white because we got the long-term advantage in that pawn structure. So that is nothing to worry about. Black charges forward, and now is when white starts his brilliancy. So if you want to pause the video, try to find an interesting move for white. Not the easiest to see here, but we're going to look at it. And that move is bishop to e5. It's like a very powerful move. You can see it's a pawn and a half better for white already. But the key idea is, okay, well, in the game, black ended up playing bishop to d6, and that's when Koltanowski unleashed his brilliancy. But let's imagine trying to find a move for black here. It's hard to find anything to really do like a good move. So let's look at queen to b6. How would you respond to queen to b6? Because I think this is kind of thematic about the positions that we get. I've mentioned this in other videos. We kind of get a certain theme over and over, I've noticed, in this Colle system. And that is, in this position, we actually have this good move, queen to g3. And what you'll notice, the more you play the Colle system, you will get so many times where you get a double attack using the queen, where in this case we're double attacking g7, threatening mate on g7, and using the queen to support the threat to another square, that is the bishop going to c7, right? With the double attack on two major pieces. So this just happens over and over and over again in the Colle system. So that's one of the reasons I like this game. So another, let's see, what else could they do? This is actually really interesting. So another thing you might think they may want to do would be to play queen to e7. And now, interestingly, we have similar themes going on. We can take there, and then right here, bishop takes g7. The point being that if black were to take that bishop with their king, same kind of idea here. King to e8. Bam. Hitting this. Save that. We got this. So it's just, once again, our queen ends up being a very menacing piece in these Colle systems. Now, in the game, black actually played bishop to d6. Now, pause it and try to find the move here for white. If you've watched the video series, you know, I have full Colle playlist that I'm working on building out, but a good chance that you'll find the move here because it's very thematic. It ties in with the whole game. And if you think about the whole reason that white was trying to play e5 in these positions is to dislodge the knight that is normally on f6, providing protection to the h7 square. Well, that knight isn't there to protect that square. And lo and behold, bam, we do have the bishop sacrifice. Not much of a sacrifice because it's completely crushing. So if black takes the bishop, which they did in the game, queen to h5 check, king to g8, and now see if you can find the move here. Another interesting move, and it's going to lead to a kind of a thematic attack that we can get in these Colle systems. You know, if black goes wrong, which will happen over and over and over again at club level. Well, the move here for white is actually bishop takes g7. If king takes g7, the whole idea is we have a rook lift. You see the rook can come up here and threaten to swing over with this mate, where we cut off the two. Now that we've opened up the king, he is sitting on his own over there. All we got to do is take away all the king's flight squares, and with these rook lifts, these major pieces work so well together. And so in the game, black threw in this bishop to h2 check. Doesn't do anything except kind of prolong the pain a little bit. Koltanowski played king to h1. Now, basically, he's trying to stop mate here. It's going to be mate if something's not done. Rook takes, bishop takes, queen takes. And now, black played rook to g8. And after rook to e5, once again threatening to come in and this kind of thing, taking all these squares on these two files away. Black resigned. Koltanowski ended up going on to win the Belgian championship, got the Brilliancy Prize for this game, and used the Colle against top competition to just get a beautiful game. And so kind of our key takeaways in this game were the e5 square, right? Everything revolving after we got to this point here. Everything was this fight over this e5 square. And black was able to physically stop us from pushing e5. But in effect, didn't much matter because in the process, they lost this knight's protection of h7, right? Because they ended up going to g4, circling back to use it to physically block on e5. And then we saw some, beautiful tactics out of it. We saw the rook lift from d4, threatening to go over and mate on h4, forcing black to sacrifice their queen to stop the attack. So a very thematic game in the Colle, getting our e4 break in, threatening e5, and yeah, most people are not prepared for the Colle, and that's why you notice, like in the club level database, this queen to c7 move only played 7% of the time, where in fact that is the most common move played by master level players. So beautiful opening system at club level. I want to start examining games by these legends. Koltanowski is going to be a huge role model for us. Absolute legend, 4-time Belgian champion, 3-time Chance Olympiad player. He actually has the for a long time he had the record of the most games played blindfolded simultaneously at 34 games, which he would use the Colle system for. So I think he lived to like 96 years old. Contributed a lot to American chess. He was called the Dean of American Chess. So we'll definitely go over a bunch of his games. I think we can learn a lot from them. And kind of these older games from these masters back, way back when this system was first being developed. You can get good ideas of key themes to play for that will certainly be effective at our level, at club level. So hope you found that interesting, and we will be examining more legends in the future, more heroes of the Colle. All right, take care, guys.